Hey everyone, Saturn Dave here from Sega Saturn SHIRO, and I wanted to do a little video about racing games on the Sega Saturn. You know, racing is one of my favorite genres of all time, and the Saturn is my favorite console of all time, so it's no surprise that the Saturn is home to several great racers. And this is going to be my personal top 10 racing games that I recommend to you, along with a couple of honorable mentions as well. I know this video might be a little cliche, but it just felt like a fun thing to do. I'll get through them quick and I'll kind of give you a few anecdotes about each game so that you, if you're looking at the Saturn as a console to get into, or you just love racing games and you have a Saturn but you want some recommendations, these are my personal recommendations for you. Starting with number 10. And that is, I think we're going to go with Road Rash. Now, this game might rank higher for other people, and it all depends on you. But this is an excellent game by EA. Of course, a lot of people know the Road Rash series. Honestly, I wish we would get more of these games these days, but I mean, it's got a banger soundtrack, you know, from mid-90s grunge artists like Soundgarden and Paw, etc. You've got, of course, a great ambiance when you go into the bar and you schmooze with like other racers. You go into the bathroom to change your settings and stuff and save your games or delete your game saves. You know, you got great FMV sequences with high production value. What more can I say? Unfortunately, the grunge music and everything does not play during the races. I feel it kind of like suffers from that a little bit. But the gameplay itself is amazing. I wouldn't say this is the best port, but it's a competent port, and it's perfectly fine if you have a Sega Saturn and you want to play it on the Saturn. It's great. Highly recommend Road Rash on the Saturn. Fun motorcycle combat game, you know, whipping your enemies with chains, upgrading your bikes, just so much fun. Next up is Choro Q Park. This is a kind of Japan-only racing game, kind of similar to the Mario Kart series by Takara. And it all revolves around these little penny racers that you could buy in the grocery store, even in America, back in the early 90s, and definitely they were a huge hit in Japan. Little penny racers that had a spring, you'd pull back and they'd go forward. If you stuck a penny in the back, they'd do little wheelies because they were back heavy. Lots of people are confused by this game and don't like it because they don't understand what's happening because of the language barrier. They get into this game, they start playing, their car goes really slow, and they're like, this is not fun, turn it off, you know. But really, it's all about spending money to buy new penny racers. And you'll have off-road racers, you'll have racers that go really fast on a straightaway, racers that have better handling. You're going to place them at strategic locations on the track, and there are these change pads. When you cross a change pad, you change to a different racer, and each racer has a fully charged spring, which means they're able to go really fast right off the change pad, but that spring wears out over time and they start to slow down. The benefit of that is you reach another change pad and you're able to change over to a different racer, and that way you're able to keep going around the track. And that's the whole point of it, is if you're just trying to race with one vehicle, you're never going to get anywhere because your spring is going to wear out and you're going to go too slow. I highly recommend that if you've tuned out on this game or you don't like it, try it again. Try buying a few penny racers in the shop and placing them at strategic locations on the course. You'll have so much more fun. There's tires you can lob at your enemies. There's oil slicks that you can put down. It's not as good as Mario Kart, I'm not going to say that, but it's a lot of fun. Definitely try out Choro Q Park on the Saturn. Fun game. Manx TT Superbike. This is a port by Tantalus. It's excellent in my opinion. Maybe not as good as the arcade, but they did a great job bringing over the core racing from the arcade. It's low on content, only 2 tracks. One is a more straightforward, easy track, and then of course you've got the more difficult track that's winding and goes through like a little town and everything. You can race as a sheep. There's a code for that. The bikes handle great. I highly recommend the 3D control pad for this game. The music is good, but the volume is too low and the mix is terrible. And honestly, if it had been like a banger soundtrack from Takanobu Mitsuyoshi, it would have been that much better. But even as it is, I think Manx TT Superbike is awesome. You know, racing these motorcycles on the Isle of Man at breakneck speeds. What more can you ask for? Lots of fun if you're looking for a motorcycle racing game on the Saturn. Next up is Initial D. Initial D is a game that wouldn't even have ranked on my best of anything list a few years ago, and now I actually adore this game. I absolutely love this game. I love, you know, it makes a difference that I love the anime series and I love the manga, you know, so that kind of, you know, that kind of boosts this up for me a little bit. But the fact is, this is a really tough as nails drift racer by Genki. And I think they might have tried to make it really hard to illustrate the fact that Takumi had to work very, very hard to become the drift racer that he is. You didn't just have that skill overnight, and as such, you're not just going to fire this game up and be a god from the beginning. It's not that kind of game. It's not an arcade style racer. This has got a very nuanced drift mechanic that I think works so well once you get it. This does support the steering wheel, the racing wheel, and it supports the D-pad. I don't think that it supports the 3D control pad. I could be wrong about that, but in any event, oh no, I don't think it works very well. I think it's very sensitive if it supports it at all. But if my memory serves, if you plug in the 3D control pad, the game pauses itself. So I don't think it actually works with the 3D control pad. That said, you know, work with this game. Play with this game a while, come to grip with the drift mechanic, and you'll be doing amazing drifts without touching a guardrail, and you'll feel like Takumi, and that's the whole point, is you're supposed to feel like this god drifter, you know, but that doesn't come easy. That skill doesn't come easy. It's hard fought, and I think it's a great game. People don't give this game enough credit. They just crash into a few walls and they give up on it. But it's an amazing game if you give it the time. It's got a great soundtrack. By default, but it's got an even better soundtrack from a person in the community whose name escapes me at the moment, but they did an Eurobeat mix where they mixed in all of the original Eurobeat tunes and just made it that much better. So I highly recommend Initial D to folks who haven't tried it, or maybe you've tried it but you gave up on it. Try it again. It's a great game by Genki, and I think more folks need to give it a second shot. VR Virtua Racing. This is a phenomenal racing game with tons of content, and I think really it's the content that redeems it. It is not a port. It is a remake technically, because the studio Time Warner and Chris Tolman, those guys were given an arcade cabinet to kind of eyeball to be able to rebuild this, as we learned from Pandemonium's documentary. And so they put together this game and just added so much content to it, and really it's just the wealth of content and different cars and tracks and options of this game that make it so good. The music is phenomenal in this game, and yet it falls short because they only play it for a few seconds at checkpoints, and I think that's a real shame, because they re-recorded all the music with real studio instruments, and it sounds phenomenal. It's just it only plays at checkpoints. And then also, you know, I would highly recommend trying this with the racing wheel. I don't often recommend folks try the arcade racing wheel because it's a little iffy on a lot of games. Doesn't really add anything to a lot of games, but it does with this one, especially with the carts. Anything with a really low center of gravity works great with the racing wheel, and so I highly recommend this game. Even you know, driving the F1 cars in the cockpit mode just feels so good. All things considered, it may not control as good as the arcade version, but it controls great, and I really think folks should give VR Virtua Racing, Time Warner's VR Virtua Racing, a shot. Next up is Drift King 97. This is also a Genki drifting game, but so much different than Initial D. This is kind of an arcadey drifting game where you can fire this up and start to get a hang of the drifting right away, and you can even feel like a hot shot, you know, right off the jump. Of course, it's going to take you a while to master the drifting mechanic, but the thing is, you'll do quite well right off the hop, and it's a really phenomenal game where you're basically drifting and racing opponents on the freeway. It's the precursor to the Tokyo Extreme Racing series, and it's a really phenomenal game. Our buddy Malenko did a English translation of this, and he even put in Craig Stadler as a little cameo appearance. I highly recommend folks check this out if they like the whole Wangan style, you know, Tokyo freeway racing games. It's phenomenal. Next up, we have Outrun. This is, of course, a famous arcade superscaler by Sega, and of course this Japanese version is a perfect port of the arcade, and it runs at 60 frames per second, which is phenomenal. I can't say the same about the one that came out in the US. I think, and it also supports the 3D control pad and the steering wheel, and it's Outrun. I mean, it's Outrun. It's phenomenal. My friend Pat, my SHIRO bro Pat, gifted me this game, and thank you, buddy. I really appreciate it, and I will treasure this forever. And it's absolutely a banger. Like, you know, what more can I say about Outrun that hasn't already been said? But definitely check it out if you haven't. Next is Sega Touring Car Championship. I absolutely love and adore this game. I used to defend the hell out of this game and say, you know, it's so much better than people give it credit for. I recognize that it has a bunch of faults and flaws, but, you know, folks should play it anyway. These days, I really don't feel like defending it nearly as much. I think that it is objectively good. Well, it's certainly subjectively good, but I think it's more objectively good if folks just spend the time with it. This is one of those games where it is not just pick up and play. For the most part, people pick it up and they smash into walls because they don't realize that this is not an arcade drift style racer. This is a grip racer. You're going breakneck speeds. You have to, you know, learn how to use, you have to use the 3D control pad with this game. You can't use the D-pad. There's no nuance on the D-pad. They didn't work very hard to make the D-pad feel good like Sega Rally did, you know. With this game, you really need the 3D control pad. But when you have the 3D control pad and you use, you know, shifting, manual shifting, and you learn how to grip drive, it's phenomenal. And I highly recommend this game. It's got loads of content. It's compatible with the Netlink so that you can upload your times to the leaderboards, and that's still available because of Zaiden over on the Dreamcast Talk forums. He made that happen so that folks can still do that if they have a Dream Pi, that they can upload their times. And yeah, no, it's just a phenomenal game with an excellent soundtrack by Avex Tracks, and you know, it's based on that Deutsche Tourenwagenmeisterschaft, the DTM ITC International Touring Car of the mid-90s series. So it's phenomenal, and it's one of my favorite games. Folks should definitely check it out. It does kind of fall short based on the fact that it has like a 20 frames per second frame rate, which is kind of a crime for a racing game. But all things considered, I think that if you can look past that, I mean, other games like Daytona have a 20 frame per second, you know, frame rate. So that's not uncommon of racing games in that mid-90s era. And I definitely think folks should check it out if they haven't. Next up, Sega Rally Championship. This probably should be number one on my list just because it is objectively the best game on the Saturn, best racing game on the Saturn. It controls sublime. It controls great with the D-pad or the 3D control pad, and even supports the racing wheel, although I don't recommend it. Racing wheel is much too sensitive, and it has a really big dead zone that kind of makes it a no-go for me. But I mean, there's two-player split screen. You've got the Delta and the Celica, which are both excellent cars, and you also have the Stratus, which is a lot of fun as well. Once you get good with the Delta and the Celica, I think you can do quite well with the Stratus, and that ends up being like OP, just way faster than the Delta and the Celica. But it's just a phenomenal game with excellent control, no matter whether you're playing D-pad or 3D control pad. They did such a brilliant job making this game control well, and the drifting feels so great in it. This is a game that beginners can come to and have a fun time, and then also people who have played it for nearly 3 decades like myself can keep coming to and just enjoying and loving the hell out of this game. So I highly recommend Sega Rally if you haven't tried it. Chances are you have, and you feel about it just like I do. My favorite racing game on the Saturn is going to be Daytona USA, and part of that is because just the nostalgia and the fact that this game is partially responsible for me even getting into Saturn in the first place. It was this game that I originally sought out when I was looking for a console that could play the because I loved this game in the arcade, and I absolutely dreamed of the day that I could find a console that could play a version of Daytona USA. And so this is what really made me seek out the Saturn in the first place. It's just brilliant arcade, off the rails arcade drifting. which is funny because it's NASCAR, right? There's really no drifting in NASCAR, not really. But this is, you know, stock cars going around, you know, either an oval track or some circuit tracks, and they're just roller coaster style drifting, you know, like you're going really, really fast. You got like 40 opponents on the track. You're just weaving in and out of traffic and jockeying for position and pulling off these crazy drifts around, you know, around corners and burning up the tires and smashing up the car. It's so much fun. The music is Takanobu Mitsuyoshi at his finest. Just, I can't say enough good things about this game, and really it is this original game that has the best handling. It may, you know, suffer from some graphic pop in and everything, but that does not stop the game from being enjoyable. Really, the draw in just doesn't, you look past that once you just start having fun and controlling the game. With CCE, I'm one of those guys that'll say, you know, I think it does, you know, look a little better, but it doesn't control better, at least for my money. You know, they tweaked it and kind of built it off of the Sega Rally engine, which it's just a totally different game that controls completely differently. And so personally, my money's on the original Daytona USA, which I think is, you know, it's still to this day arcade power. It's my favorite racing game of all time, and my favorite racing game on the Saturn. So I absolutely love Daytona USA, and I will you know, take that to my grave. Now for honorable mentions, these are a few games that fell outside my top 10, but ones that I definitely think you guys should check out, and that's Street Racer. Street Racer is kind of like a cartoony, you know, racing game similar to like Mario Kart. It's got like the Mode 7 thing going on for the tracks and the backgrounds. Beautiful cartoon animation. This was a multi-platform game, so it can be played on other systems, but the Saturn version is quite good, and I highly recommend Street Racer. I believe that this was released in PAL regions, so the PAL territory got a copy, and so did Japan. We didn't get it in the US, but you know, now you just download it and put it on your ODE. Check out Street Racer, it's a lot of fun. Touge King 2, The Spirits. This is one that is really good downhill drift racer, downhill and uphill. It's tough as nails. I haven't really come to grips with it yet. Some folks in the community have really spent a ton of time with it and had their ups and downs with it, and then come out loving it and say that it really it heavily relies on the tuning of the vehicles, and it, you know, you just gotta stick with it and really just work on the tuning of the vehicle and work on, you know, the handling, which is all down to, you know, manual shifting and you know, grip, putting more grip on your tires and stuff like that. But essentially, it's a game with a lot of depth. It's also a looker. It's one of the better looking games, and published and by Cave, well, developed by Cave and published by Atlas. And Cave, of course, were known for like their shooters and stuff, but they also did racing games and did quite a good job at that. And of course, its prequel, which is High Velocity Mountain Racing Challenge, or Touge King, just the first one in Japan, also you know, developed by Cave and published by Atlas, both in Japan and in the West. This one, unlike its successor, is much more arcadey and just a hell of a lot of fun. I've really come to love this game. I don't know that I would rank it in my top 10, but it's a tempting one. You know, this one works amazing with the arcade racer, the steering wheel. So I would say that this game kind of makes the steering wheel worth owning. Highly recommend that one. F1 Challenge is another great like arcade style F1 game. This is not developed by Sega. It was Bell Labs, I think, and Virgin Interactive did the publishing duties, but it ends up feeling like a Sega arcade racing game. It's a lot of fun. Highly recommend it. And there's a lot of strategy in conserving tires and gas and your airfoil on your vehicle and all that stuff. So it's a lot of fun. WipEout, of course, is a game that needs no introduction. Psygnosis, and published by SoftBank. This one is not a great port on a Saturn, but it's a competent port. Of course, it's better on PlayStation, but it's one that I can easily recommend. You do have the benefit of being able to use the Saturn's D-pad, which feels much better than the PlayStation, and you know, it's it's a competent racer on the Saturn if you like WipEout. And then last but not least is Road and Track presents the Need for Speed. This is kind of a... It ranks lower on my list just because they did it better with Road Rash. I feel like Road Rash had more vibes. It had more character to it. This one is pretty straightforward racing. It's kind of an earlier racing game. Definitely it's the first of the Need for Speed series, and it just hadn't quite figured out what it wanted to be at that point. But it's still fun racing these cars on these roads. It's faster. This version is definitely faster than the 3DO version. 3DO version kind of feels a little smoother but more floaty. The vehicles just don't feel like they go as fast, whereas this one on the Saturn, it just runs a lot faster. The frame rate's higher and the cars go faster. And I believe in Japan they released it as Nissan presents GTR Overdriven or something like that. It was basically a game. They basically swapped out all of the vehicles for basically like Nissan Skylines GTRs, you know. So that's kind of interesting. Their attempt at like localizing it for a Japanese market, but yeah, it's fun in doses, but I just don't feel like it's that good in hindsight. But you might disagree with me, and feel free to disagree with me and leave some comments if you feel differently about that game, or if there's any other racing games that you would recommend. There's a lot more than just that, but that's my top 10, and then, you know, 5 honorable mentions for you guys, just so you have some recommendations to look at if you're getting into Sega Saturn and you need some good racing recommendations. I hope you guys will check out these games, and feel free to leave comments below regarding any of the racing games that you like or that you'd recommend. I'll be sure to check them out if I haven't already. And until next time, this is Saturn Dave reminding you that you must play Sega Saturn, and go check out SegaSaturnShiro.com for all your news and recommendations, articles. We got magazine there, and we also got merch that you can buy, and a lot of links to our friends and resources. So check out SegaSaturnShiro.com, and until next time, I'll catch you later. Sega Saturn Shiro!